Today we're going to talk about the 7 worst foods for joint pain and arthritis, and then I'm going to go right into the foods that you should eat for arthritis and joint pain. And I am going to touch mostly on osteoarthritis, but also rheumatoid arthritis and gout. And I've had so many old injuries in the past that these old injuries can definitely haunt someone the older that they get. So arthritis and inflammation is a very important thing on my mind. So I'm always diving into this topic, and I found something that I want to share with you that is extremely interesting. I just have to give you a couple little basics on some words that I need to define. The first one is a chondrocyte. What is that? It's a cell that makes up your cartilage, okay? So when we're dealing with joint pain, it's important to kind of dig into what makes up a joint and study that. And knowing this information could potentially completely resolve your arthritis pain. What did I find? Well, when I was studying these chondrocytes and how inflammation develops, there's always this reference to this term right here. And before I tell you what the term is, it's something in your cells as a part of the assembly line to help make certain things. And this particular thing in your cells has a job of folding proteins. It's just like you would like folding a paper airplane, right? You have to fold it in a certain way so it'll work. Same thing with your cells. Deep inside, you have this little factory that is manipulating different amino acids to make different proteins in a certain shape. And that thing is called you ready for this? Endoplasmic reticulum. It's a part of the factory in your cell that folds proteins so you can use them. It also has a function of storing calcium. Interesting to me is that you have a lot of different things that can happen in the cell. You have a lot of different parts, but they kept bringing up this particular part of that factory having stress that originates the cascade of inflammatory events even before mitochondrial damage. And I found that very, very interesting. All right, so just hang with me. There's a couple more pieces of this puzzle, but that's the first one. The second thing that I learned was even more mind-blowing, because in this chondrocyte, there happens to be receptors for bile salts. Now, wait a second, bile salts? That's in your gallbladder. Why do you have receptors for bile in your joints? That didn't make sense to me. I had to kind of go deeply into this for like an hour or two to really wrap my wits around it. But in summary, this is what I found. There's 2 types of bile. Okay, you have the bile that your liver makes that helps you digest fat, but you also have another bile called the secondary bile, not the primary, that your microbes help you make from your own bile. They're not actually making bile, they're just manipulating yours in a way that changes them to create other functions in the body that go way beyond just digestion, the digestion of fats. So in other words, there's other important functions of bile salt. And one function is acting as a potent anti-inflammatory in your joints. So apparently some of these bile salts get into your blood and they go to different parts of the body, like your joints, and help protect the joint. and they help reduce inflammation, which is very, very interesting. When I was in practice, I know when people had their gallbladders out or they had some antibiotic, they nearly always got some type of arthritis or joint pain. So it got the wheels spinning on that topic. But then I remembered TUDCA. What is TUDCA? TUDCA is a very specialized bile salt, and it's a supplement that people take. But I had no idea until I looked it up that one of the unique things about TUDCA is that it reduces this ER stress, this endoplasmic reticulum stress. As a very unique benefit, this bile salt reduces stress on the endoplasmic reticulum. And so now it started to make more sense that basically the bile is not just reducing inflammation, it's actually helping the factory that actually is repairing and maintaining and building your joints, because this is a real key part of that process. And so this connection of the bile is super important in protecting this part of the cell machinery and also to keep the inflammation out of this right here. Because if something happens with that bile and you're deficient and you get more of this endoplasmic stress, then what happens as a cascade of events, you start getting mitochondrial stress, and now we have a breakdown of this whole apparatus. And also calcium is involved because apparently this little endoplasmic reticulum has another function of storing calcium. So you can imagine when we're talking about joints, we're also talking about preventing calcification. So that's just something new, a very foundational thing. I'm going to relate this to the worst foods for arthritis and then also the best foods, so you can then have enough of these from the diet and know how to control that and reduce your arthritis or inflammation in your joints. And maybe you've heard of the gut-brain axis, okay? Well, there's a gut-joint axis as well. And that's where I got the information from. I will share that in the link down below if you want to learn more about it. But apparently these bile salts are potent anti-inflammatory. And I'm talking about the bile salts that come from your own microbes making them. Wild. And just since we're on the topic of bile, I want to touch just more on this TUDCA, which is a different type of bile salt. It's actually bear bile, and they don't take it from bears anymore. They make it synthetically. This bile is very potent in shutting down inflammatory signaling molecules in arthritis, which is this right here. I don't want to give you more complex words. Just realize that TUDCA helps shut down inflammation very potently with all types of arthritis. Another key piece of the puzzle, which is vitamin K2. Maybe you've heard of vitamin K1, which has to do with clotting. And some people take a medication called warfarin, which blocks vitamin K1 so they don't clot as much. And so they're preventing heart attacks. So that's vitamin K1, but vitamin K2 does something slightly different. It prevents calcium from building up in the soft tissues. If you are deficient in vitamin K2 for some reason, you may get calcification in the joints or the arteries, possibly, or even osteophytes, which are little spurs that can happen around the joints. One interesting thing about people that are on warfarin, one of the side effects is not only the blocking of vitamin K1, but also the blocking of vitamin K2. It won't work. And this is why one of the side effects of warfarin is increased calcification of your soft tissues in the joints and in the arteries. I mean, it's pretty wild that you're taking warfarin for the heart with the side effect of having it create calcification in the blood vessels around the heart. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But what you should know is vitamin K2 is in foods that are higher in fat. So when we get to the diet part, I'll explain more on that. But this is a really key vitamin to keep the calcium from building up in the joints and reducing inflammation. Now let's talk about RA, rheumatoid arthritis. This is an autoimmune disease where your own immune system is attacking itself. So we have these antibodies that are against our own joints, and that keeps the joint in a constant state of inflammation. I'm not going to give you any more new words with the immune system, but it's going to be an imbalance with these two little things right here. And all you need to know is there is a really important vitamin that helps to put the fire out and reduce inflammation, and that is vitamin D. But if you take regular amounts of vitamin D, it might not create a therapeutic effect. In fact, it's probably not going to be. You have to take larger amounts to create this therapeutic effect on the joints, but really you're creating it on the immune system, because rheumatoid arthritis is more of an immune problem than a joint problem, because there's a lot of different autoimmune diseases. Rheumatoid arthritis is just one of them, but it's a problem within the immune system. So as far as the amount of vitamin D you would have to take, I would take at least, at the very minimum, 20,000 IUs, but probably 30 or 40. I'm going to put a link down below of maybe a doctor you want to work with if you have rheumatoid arthritis to regulate how much vitamin D you need, and then do other tests to make sure you're doing it correctly. But when you're taking high doses of vitamin D3, you should also take magnesium and zinc and vitamin K2, because they all work together. But this will greatly reduce inflammation in the joint. Whether you have rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis, vitamin D is one of the best anti-inflammatories, especially for the knees and your lower back, actually in any joint. If you're deficient in vitamin D, your inflammatory signals go way up. Now, when you have arthritis or joint pain, there are things that are triggering it from food, like a food allergy. So we will be talking about that, some of the most common things in the foods. Also, there's advanced glycated end products. That comes from having glucose or sugar with a protein. Basically, when you do high carbs, you're going to get these, and that's going to create this sticky protein that's going to create inflammation. They have found in the joints this certain thing called biofilm, and there's microbes in the biofilm. It's kind of like this slime or this protective glue that has microbes in these little calcium shells. And so your immune system can't find these microbes. Well, guess what? They found some of those microbes are related to your teeth. Yeah. So if you have an old root canal that's infected, and somehow that infection is still there in your gums, and that sits in your gum for a period of time, and that can leak into your lymphatic system, into your blood, and it can go into the joints, and it can go into the arteries, and it can keep you arthritic. But the big new thing that I wanted to share with you today is this microbiome problem. Wow, the importance of your microbiome and your joints is way more significant than actually I thought. So it's something we're going to cover when we talk about the food right now.